very warm welcome to all of you innovators, disruptors, and builders who've so gracefully joined us today in our day of celebrating you. FTX is India's premier fintech conference, right? A definitive celebration of all of that we've achieved and disrupted in the Indian market. So we have a very eclectic mix of panel discussions and a masterclass today for you here at the Dare stage. The reason we call this the Dare stage is because this is for those that push beyond the limits, raise the bar for what it means to be an innovator, right? Quick question before we get started. How many of you in this hall at some point or the other have used ChatGPT? Quick show of hands. I've never seen this much consensus in any public platform on anything, right? AI has become ubiquitous, right from the usage that you're seeing in this hall to even on earnings calls where CEOs are stressing the word AI multiple times. I think there was a meme video of this happening as well. And that is the day we live in, right? AI has been around since the 1950s. But in the last 2-3 years, just because of A, the transformer architecture, and B, the sheer amount of compute that's evolved, right? We've seen a massive surge in the adoption of AI. And in that regard, it makes me extremely happy that it's not just empowering innovation, it's not just ensuring that creating content is easier, but unfortunately or fortunately, it is really upping the stakes on what matters for risk and cybersecurity in today's day and age, right? With the massive amount of digitization that's happened, risk, compliance, and cybersecurity are non-negotiables for any company that seeks to serve its customers well. And in this situation, it only becomes pertinent to understand the challenges, the mitigation, and what lies ahead for us in the future. So in that regard, I would love to welcome our panelists for our first discussion on managing risk and cybersecurity in the age of AI. First up, I would like to call upon Mathan Babu Kasilingam, CTSO and Data Privacy Officer at Vodafone India. Please welcome, sir. Bharat Panchal, Chief Industry Relations and Regulatory Officer, India at Discover. Vipin Surelia, VP and Head of Risk Services at Visa. And Kiran Jagannath, Head of Financial Services, India and South Asia at AWS. And to moderate this panel, we have Hilal Ahmad Loan, CISO at Razorpay, taking over. Thank you, folks. Over to you.
Welcome, everyone. So it's a massive pleasure for me to be moderating this esteemed panel. So we have some of the industry luminaries with us. And I think honestly, I'm sure that you also felt that the introduction was way too short. So what I would love to do is actually basically we have a very brief basically introduction from the panelists themselves. We'll start with Kiran. Can you tell us about yourself and then more?
Sure, Hilal. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kiran Jagannath. I head financial services for AWS in India and South Asia. Been with Amazon for 4+ years. Been with financial services for 28+ years, so I'm going to definitely date myself. And when the host was saying that AI existed since 1950, I clearly knew I've definitely dated myself because I studied it in my engineering. So I'm a banker by background, spent the first 15 years with the Citi and American Express, and now I've moved on to the other side, spending time taking technology innovations to bankers in India.
Good morning and pleasure to be at FTX. This is the second time I'm coming here. I'm Vipin. I work for Visa as their Chief Risk Officer. I have been part of the industry for roughly the same time which Kiran mentioned. I feel quite dated, studied in the last century, which sounds like almost 100 years ago. Have done different roles, started as a regulator, scared the shit out of a lot of people for almost half my life, and then I decided there's much more to do elsewhere. So have worked for a private fintech, a government fintech, and in between did some commercial roles. And last 5 years, I did product operations technology, POT roles, but now I have crossed over and joined my other colleagues on the risk side. I find it very boring. I'll try to make it more interesting as we go along.
Let me not start where you ended. So my name is Bharat Panchal. And I'm fortunate that I'm, sharing a stage with my two former colleagues, which we work together at NPCI. I'm currently working with the Diners Club International as a regulatory officer for India. And before that, I used to work with FIS Global as chief risk officer for half of the world. My, my longest stint as one of the co-founder and chief of risk and compliance and security for NPCI. I was quite fortunate to sail through that unseen environment when we started NPCI way back in 2010. When I left 2019 from NFS to FASTag, I was fortunate to design risk control framework for all the product, including the most prestigious UPI. My background, I'm PhD, I've done my MBA and graduation in technology. I worked with many banks like Kotak and Citibank, and before that I was in telecommunication with Reliance and Tata's. Great to be here, though Razorpay was started in my small cabinet NPCI when we started onboarding them at the NPCI ecosystem. But great to be here because when we see the vibrancy and the kind of vibes, what I've seen today in Shashank's presentation or other keynote, that brings a lot of satisfaction back to us that yes, whatever time and effort we have put into the build this great ecosystem is a great result of gathering what we see today. Thank you.
Morning all, my name is Mathan. Started my career in cyber, one of the odd men out over here, and possibly the topic that we are speaking on. Been there for a couple of decades, slightly more than a couple of decades. All my career I have spent in cybersecurity, so I took the pride in setting up some of the cybersecurity for leading banks, leading telcos across the country as a consulting position. One of my customers hired me. HDFC Bank hired me. That is when I had to switch sides from being a consultant, architect, implementer to operate that when the digital banking era started booming here in the country. From bank, I went on to working with NPCI, setting up UPI security framework and securing various other from a service provider standpoint. Most often I landed up seeing frauds associating with and largely binding today with the telcos themselves because your digital identity is what your mobile number is. And as a tech guy, it kept me thinking what actually is going behind in a telco, which motivated me to move beyond banking career and get into telco. Here I am with Vodafone Idea, we as their chief, we call as technology security because I look at the network, the core telco network security too, and a data privacy officer for Vodafone Idea. More than happy to exchange my thoughts here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my name is Hilal and I'm the CISO for the Razorpay. Just basically think about it, it's such an amazing mix of experience and they have been our enablers, supporters. In some cases, Bharat is being cheerleaders. And everybody has been basically so considerate to basically take part in this channel. Thank you very much. So we're starting, so just want to give some context, right? So almost everybody has heard of some financial risk, some financial fraud. They have heard about cyber attacks. They have heard about account takeovers. They have heard about people actually misusing the platform and things like that. So fintech is a massive mover of finance in the country, right? So you can see that it actually like on a daily basis or it moves like 350 billion basically in volume, which is massive. So if somebody wants to disrupt actually Indian economy, they don't have to basically disrupt the critical infrastructure. So they can just go and basically disrupt the financial transaction systems. So if my UPI is down or my NFT system is down, so it actually brings basically all the economic crumbling down. So the responsibility that we have basically is to make sure that, okay, we build systems that are robust, they have enough resilience in them to make sure that they're resistant to any kind of cyber attacks and make sure that, okay, we do not actually like make our customers or consumers victims of any kind of financial fraud. So in that spirit, I will start with Mathan. So Mathan, we would love to basically hear from you, like what do you think are the unique security challenges that fintechs in India actually face?
Fintechs, I will love to hear from the fintechs as to what they face through, but overall, As a telco, we have today laid the platform, railroads, to get inroads, keeping in mind the vision the government of India had set up for ourselves. It started off with Digital India initiatives, moved on to financial inclusion, and the drive to ensure banking, fintech evolve and reach consumers in large scale to fulfill the vision of digital inclusion, financial inclusion in the country. One thing that I would want to remind us all of is we still are, when we move to developed nation, our literacy rate is something that we should be bothered about. We are still at not an optimal level. I wouldn't want to call out any percentage here. We are still not at an optimal level of literate population that we have. And here we are talking about digital literacy. To a wider population that we have, to get the digital literacy rate to that level, when we can all blame, all cybersecurity professionals will always say that user is the last weakest link. To bring up to curve their knowledge level is going to be a dream that can come fulfilled at a point in time. So there is a lot of responsibility that comes the way on tech and providers like us when the users are still unaware and frauds and crimes, cyber crimes and cyber frauds are getting committed. How do we put the tech to appropriate use? Thereby these frauds and crimes can be limited. So that's too much of burden, too much of ask on each of us, and that's all the thought that I wanted to leave for the first question, and will be eager to carry forward with the rest of the audience. Yeah.
Bharat, you seem to be having some additional thoughts on this.
No, I think what Mathan has said about the tech solution. We are in the Silicon Valley of India, but the fact is, the solutioning part of any security or anything per se in fintech is being thought in Silicon Valley, actual Silicon Valley, and implemented here in Bangalore. That is what is bringing little, disjoint or disconnect with the Indian economy and Indian consumer per se. Because, when we are thinking, sitting in this room also, we are always thinking about India. Because that's where the large penetration of tech-based solution and everything is there. But when it comes to Bharat, the Bharat is missed out somewhere. So the large population of 80% people stays in Bharat, including me, but remaining are in 20%. So that gap is not seen seriously, that how we can bring everyone as inclusive part of the integrated part of the overall fintech journey, where either the person is literate, illiterate, or digitally literate or digital illiterate, they need to engage much lesser into a security and kind of activities than doing ease of transaction. And that's where probably a lot of work is yet to be done.
Absolutely. So I think the major takeaway is that we need to have basically the concept of hygiene and concept of awareness, and make sure that the population at large is aware of the basically challenge that they face and the risks that they face. And we should actually use technology to enable and make sure that they do not actually fall victims to that. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So Kiran, I want to move to you. So you have a history of basically helping your customers basically use technology to basically safeguard their assets and safeguard their business, right? So one of the things that has been recently, and the topic itself is basically in the age of AI. So I just wanted to basically ask you, like, how have these emerging technologies like AI, cloud computing, blockchains, and all those things actually impacted the financial systems, how they see security and risk?
Sure. I'll start with cloud computing because it's close to my heart. I'm part of AWS. One thing that we bring to the table right off the bat, right, which is the security of the cloud itself. You can imagine the internet traffic that is going through public clouds, right? It far surpasses any one individual company would be managing. So there's an enormous investment we put in to make sure that that is very secure, right? In fact, at AWS, we call security a day zero activity, right? Without that, it absolutely makes no sense, and nothing else makes sense if it is not secure and customers are not feeling safe about putting their workloads, because that workload is nothing but customer data, customer transactions, and a whole lot of other things. And at the end of the day, we are all associated with financial services, And the one thing that is associated with financial services is trust. If the customers don't trust us, don't trust our brands, they will not do business with us. So it's so fundamental to the industry we are in, and that is how we approach it. So even when we talk to our customers, the first thing we do, before we even talk about how to use the cloud, is to start engaging them on how to secure their workloads, their data, because we do all the perimeter security, but once you put something in the application, the data, you're responsible for securing that. And we don't wash our hands off it. We engage our customers and enable them to do as good a job as what we do in terms of managing the secure perimeters. And there's a lot of services we have that is very easy to use, because at the end of the day, Mathan also sort of alluded to this, it needs to be simple and easy to use. If it's very complex, technology for technology's sake, especially in this topic, is not going to work. And a quick anecdote, I'll go back 20 years. 2003, I was heading up the email channel for Citi. We were number 1 in terms of phishing attacks, by far. The number 2 was 10x less than us. I think it was Bank of America, right? And how far technology has come. 20 years ago, email was an upcoming channel, right? And customers were losing trust because they were losing money. And we debated a whole lot of technologies that we can adopt to sort of prevent all these phishing attacks. And in the end, what we did was something extremely simple. In every email, we just put the last 4 digits of the credit card number and the expiry, which we knew the hacker won't have, the phisher won't have. And then, again, Mathan alluded to this, we spent a whole lot of money building awareness. And the reason is, again, going back to Bharat, what you were saying is not everybody is savvy with technology. How do you make sure even the person in Bharat, as you called it, will be able to safely secure their side of the data? And that's such a simple solution, we just went off the chart, right? As in we were not even the top 100 anymore, right? And very quickly that became standard. Now coming back to today's life, AI, we alluded to this. And I think the host in the introduction said it very astutely. It is both a boon and a bane, right? Yeah. It is providing enormous opportunities to do a whole lot of things, to provide better experiences, better products to our customers, but it is also enabling the hackers get a lot more savvy. But the good thing is, we have embedded AI in a lot of our services like Guard, UT, Macy, where it's constantly looking for patterns and searching for patterns of new attacks that we can identify a lot of times before an individual within any of our customer organizations has identified it and alert them so that we can take some secure measures. So technology, boon and a bane, but I would almost urge everybody, and I'm sure my panelists would agree, focus on the fundamentals, right? Make sure that data sprawl, vendor sprawl, all that you have a strategy for it. And then there is technology that we bring to the table to ensure we manage that effectively.
Absolutely, right? So I think at the end of the day, if the controls that we have are not easy to operate and we are not able to control them, right? So it's going to be difficult to basically implement them and basically make sure that we can actually scale them as well. So keeping it simple is actually paramount. I think making sure that we have the fundamentals actually done properly is going to be always basically the number 1 thing everybody should. So so coming to basically Bharat. So before I actually come to Bharat, so Bharat has basically co-authored a book on data security and data sovereignty. So it's an amazing book. So it talks about everything about basically the data risk, how to use the data, acceptable use of data, and things like that. Now, what we would like to know is basically in the advent of basically regulatory challenges, the privacy challenges, and all that, what do fintechs actually need to do to make sure that they are prepared to navigate the regulatory challenge and the compliance challenge that they are going to have?
So, well, from the data point of view, I think we as a country, or we as Indian, almost we are a product for somebody to generate and use the data for their benefit. I think everybody will agree with this logic. Having said so, at least one part the government has realized that data need to be secure, and of course me and my co-author reading this book way back in 2019 has created a lot of impact, and the bill is passed and now it is about to enacted. But the fact is, there is a huge cannibalization happening through fintech as far as data collection, data processing is concerned, where if I go back in 2018 when RBI mandated about data localization, there was huge hue and cry across the, the whole ecosystem that how we are going to manage and why, first of all, we need to do. But one thing we must understand that, look, when there is a regulation, there are a lot of thought process behind. And at the same time, one fundamental thing what we narrated that time, that we don't want to go into the colonization. We have had earlier Silk Road colonization, then we came to Britishers, we invaded by them, we became a colony for them. We are entering to the third colonization, which is data colonization. How we can protect our interests, how we can protect every Indian's basic privacy by, providing probable act. I think that's where the essence of the data protection bill is that. And irrespective of that, we have a right to know what we are sharing with somebody and where somebody is going to use it. Like just because you open a shop of fintech, you do not have a right to just call and, there was a study and I saw in LinkedIn yesterday that the most number of calls, 60% calls are coming from Bajaj Finance. Now, who has given this number to Bajaj Finance? Nobody knows, but at least 3 calls in a day we are getting from Bajaj Finance. How we can, I'm just, giving one particular example, but, where our data are being misused, we have really no idea at all. The second problem with us as Indian, we are so much emotional about sharing is caring. So we don't find a problem while we share any information with somebody. Of course, these 2 my colleagues are there. They know much more about me, right, compared to rest of the people. But that is not the case for rest of the people to know about me, right? But we believe that sharing is caring. We give up every damn thing to them, irrespective whether they are interested, they are listening, not listening. But that's what the human behavior, what people are having. But today, having this act in place, though we have yet not seen the real taste of act because the regulation is yet to be announced, but as and when it will come, I'm sure that it will going to change dramatically and drastically the perception of people, those who are giving the data, those who are receiving the data, those who are processing and sharing the data. But last but not least, when it comes to such strong legislation, we need to be prepared for flip side of that also, being a fintech, because though the penal provision is much lesser compared to what is there in rest of the world, but mark my word, it is not going to be a boilerplated number. It can be increased by just one day, one notification from the government, and that will bring radical change in your business. So therefore, the day when the act rules will be announced, try to comply from day one, not to get any shortcut. That is what is going to safeguard your future.
Absolutely. Like shortcuts are going to be devastating for anything. Like I don't believe in shortcuts. And at Razorpay, basically the compliance and security are the #1 priorities. And I assume that all the fintechs actually will be starting from day 0, right, rather than day 1, because that's where they start. They need to understand that this is an enabler for business, rather than basically something that's going to basically crippling their business. So I actually saw, I very briefly saw in the keynote, they actually mentioned that regulations basically is a feature rather than actually a bug. That's a very unique thought, right? So, and I believe that that's actually the case, right? So we'll continue to discuss that.
No, I think you have a choice. Whether we are in the era with AR and AJ. What is AR? Most of us are believing that it is a very aggressive regulator. But the other side, we are doing another AJ. What is aggressive jugaad? So regulation and jugaad cannot go together. Right. I think that's the fundamental problem. Because see, how many of you are using UPI? Almost everybody? Everybody, right? Everybody. How many of you know about UPI before 2016? We both. But actually, that's the reality, right? But the regulator has envisaged in 2005 that India deserved to have a retail payment system where every Indian will do one or another transaction every day by providing a digital retail payment rail to them.
Absolutely.
Now, if regulator has envisaged something 15, 20 years before, You have started coming into this journey just, few years back. And you are starting, I would not say that you are teaching to the regulator, but you are trying to circumvent in what regulator has decided or has mandated. There is no way.
Yeah.
See, all about what we are doing, and honestly, don't take it otherwise, but as a fintech, we are largely engaged into managed perceptions. Perception can be managed, but when it comes to compliance, that perception doesn't work.
Cannot manage.
You have to be realistic, you have to be pragmatic, you have to be transparent when you come with a regulator. You know what, Vipin will agree with me. One particular event happened in 2016, 11th of April 2016. We launched UPI officially. But the real launch, commercial launch happened on 28th of August 2016. What we were doing in between? We were not, hiding anything. We were not doing any cooking at backstage. Product was ready. 4 months, every alternate day, me and Dilip used to go to RBI. We were convincing that why we need to go officially roll out. And RBI has such a great question, which we even envisage ever. How can we, kind of discount their vision and their knowledge and their understanding about the ecosystem? It cannot be. So therefore, when it comes to regulation, simple thing, trust them, respect them, follow them. That is the best way.
So coming to Vipin, so Vipin, you have a very unique, basically insight into this because Visa has like not just basically the Indian-based, basically like outlook, how fintechs are actually doing, how financial transactions actually move, but you also have a global perspective as well. So I just want to understand from you. So in terms of basically like retaining and building on consumer trust, which Kiran earlier mentioned is like paramount for any business to survive. So what do you think? Like how can companies actually like make sure that they retain and build on the consumer trust?
Thank you, and a great question. So first and foremost, slightly divergent view than what Dr. Bharat said. So I want to acknowledge the great work fintechs have been doing in the most fintech-aware market in the world. I was here pre-COVID at the FTX event, and now I am again physically at the FTX event. In between, there is COVID which happened and which made our world go 2D, not what Thomas Friedman expected, but we are all glad that we are back here. So I do want to acknowledge the great work that all of you have been doing. There was not a disruption for a single day. And it really deserves something while it might go acknowledged, but we have been doing a phenomenal job. I really wish I could crystal gaze, I could tell what we should do to win the trust of our consumers. And as Mathan said, you should tell us what you are doing. Having said that, I'll try to break down the problem and the solutions into 3 different parts. So first, and everybody of us spoke about technology. So we are living in this artificial world. And those of you who have seen the Matrix movie, so it's about Neo and Morpheus and Agent Smith and red pill and blue pill. And there the world is slightly different where machines are making sure that humans live so that it can serve their need. And we are in a different era altogether. The movie doesn't prove otherwise. So first part is data. So technology has enabled data. And to win your consumers' trust and continue to maintain that, I believe we need to protect the data. And when we are talking about from a consumer lens perspective, it's being obsessed with your consumers. You have to love your customers, and you can do it only in 2 ways. Protect their data and protect your assets. And those are not conflicting choices that we have. That's the first thing. Second, and Hilal and I were having a discussion prior to this, and I believe that risk is about business opportunities. And the best risk leaders are your product managers and your CEOs. Because they have to ensure that not only they control things, they ensure it grows, it scales up, it scopes up. That is why it is very, very important that the leaders have to, especially in the fintech world, and that's the world that you are creating for oldies like Kiran and me. Sorry, Kiran. So next 25, 50 years, how it shapes out, you are doing that. So leaders in the fintech industry have to lead courageously. And when I speak about leading courageously, I'll pick up from what Bharat said. It also includes what regulators want us to do. It also includes how do we create a culture where we empathize with our customers. It's not showing a rule book when things go wrong, but giving them an option. Two, three other things, there are standards. So a lot of you use standards. There are PCI, DSS standards, EMVCO standards, etc. Helping adopt them gives you clarity of roles and responsibility, how protocols will work. That's another framework that you should definitely look up to. Last but not the least, payments is about team sports. We cannot do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. So if I were to summarize, there are, for fintechs, if you want to continue maintaining the customer trust, the 3 Ps are most important. How do you partner? How do you prioritize? And how do you protect? Last but not the least, Kiran spoke about trust. Trust is one component of payments. There is a more important component, which is about people, how they perceive things we do, how we simplify, how we engage with them, and we continue investing in them and keeping our message simple, I think, is the way forward for fintechs in my view.
Absolutely, right? So consumer trust is obviously like a business guarantor, right? So without it, it actually cannot survive at all. And for fintechs, it's especially so because there's a money movement, right? So we are very attached to the money. And if something happens or we believe that something is happening to the money, there's always going to be some amount of trust that needs to be established to make sure that people actually do trust us, not with their money, but also with the data that actually, and what Vipin was earlier mentioning, that is about basically protecting the customer data, but also protecting our assets to make sure that both of them work in synergy to ensure that the overall, basically the consumer trust is actually maintained. Very profound. Thank you so much for sharing that. So coming to one slightly basically like off-topic kind of thing. So this is for basically Bharat and Kiran, if you can quickly tell us, like the technology has evolved a lot, and so has basically the fraud, right? So the earlier, like if the technology complexity has actually increased, it also means that the way basically in cybersecurity risk has increased, they have also basically increased at the same pace. So I would like to know from you, what are the ways through which we can actually mitigate those, like how companies can actually mitigate those kind of risks very quickly, and some best practices that you can actually share.
So well, fraud is a maniac, and it's like a, the byproduct of the great journey what we have seen. But when it comes to the solutioning part, again, what we are doing, whatever is happening in the rest of the world, we are trying to bring here. I think there's a fundamental problem there, because even in the card business, there are models available with India specific, the APEC specific or US specific, and part of the world. That model does not work here, though it is great, AI engine which are almost adaptive learning and almost near real time, kind of improving the model. But that is not working here. The problem here, the challenge and the modus operandi of fraudster is completely unique in India. How many of you are aware that Jamtara model and Mewat model is nowhere existing in the world? Right? Because how are you going to protect this kind of model? Very low cost attack. In Jagannath, there is a very seven cross road, and there is one ATM. The guy, he invested just 50 paisa to make money. You know what he did? He just he elevated the cancel button switch on the ATM keyboard, and he put one piece of the mastic, so it was become defunct. He just invested 50 paisa and he made huge money. How are you going to deal with this kind of problem? That's a fundamental problem in solutioning part. But having said so, in terms of India's payment ecosystem, especially the UPI-led payment ecosystem, the fraud ratio is much lower compared to the card-based fraud, because we generally compare a fraud to sales ratio, right? So that way, the UPI part is much lower. The problem to deal with in India is 95% problem are not at all related to a technology or technology failure, because it is 95% bring GIF effect. What is GIF? 70% of fraud are purely because of greed, 10 to 15 are because of ignorance, and 10 to 15 because of fear. So unless that you address GIF factor, yes, I'm not saying that everything is foolproof and there is no issue at all. 5 to 7% fraud are also happening because of technical loophole. Like the most non-Cosmos bank, it was because of the technology glitches, right? But if we see from the consumer point of view, it is purely how you can impart the knowledge and awareness about how to safely use payment system. That is fundamental problem. Now, coming to the AI base, see, we all are going ahead in the wave of AI. Of course, AI has really great use case, which you can implement, rather we have seen the great use case. But till the time your conscious mind is not diluted and not become biased, your AI model is going to work till then.
Absolutely.
Unless you protect that bias, you will not get the real output, because what you feed into, that is what you are going to get.
Absolutely.
So human intelligence has to always remain superior than AI, then
Absolutely.
only you can solve this problem.
Absolutely. So basically, like not only based on super, it does not need to be super technical, right? So low tech hacks or low tech basically compromise can be even equally devastating. Yeah. So Kiran, quickly some
Yeah.
best practices that you can share.
Absolutely. No, I just wanted to share the other side of the coin, right? Which is, as long as there's technology, there will be fraud, there will be cyber attacks, and all of these. I think I'm a glass half full guy, right? You need to see the other side, which is the same technology, like I said earlier, you can use for the good of it as well, right? And the beauty of it, Bharat gave the example of the ATM fraud. 10 years ago also, such fraud would not have been caught for a month, 2 months later, because we just did not have the technology and the compute prowess to look at it in real time and identify early so that we can protect our customers. That's what AI and such things can do now, right? Because they are identifying these patterns very early, catching this early, and that's what eventually comes down to protection. And Vipin actually said this very eloquently, especially for the crowd, right? The fintech crowd here. It goes back to your tagline there, which is dream, dare, and disrupt. Right? So use technology for innovating, right? Dare to dream, and these innovations are what is now being exported out of India, right? And that's what we all need to be proud about. And that's why also the session is not called eliminating risk, it's called managing risk. Risk will always be there. And there's always technology that's going to help you, mitigate it and bring it to controlling it enough so that it makes sense to run a business.
Thank you so
Hilal,
much.
quick comment from
Sure.
me. So what we have seen is, and fraud is not the old classical fraud which used to happen. So it spreads across channels, it goes across this, not a single risk team which, okay, there's a fraud which happened, investigated, cuts across cyber, telcos, and Mathan would say that. So in our view, what we have seen is fintechs which hire diverse set of talents are able to see those connections. And I'll give you a very small example. So one of the partners in a different geography realized that he was having a data breach when his finance team and his risk team got together to reconcile, do you know what? The AWS billing. So they realized somebody is there in the system taking out the data. So that's one point I do want to make, and talent matters. A. B, yes, machines are there, but they can't, or not at a stage where they can overtake the talent. The other thing is, and it goes back to our own philosophy around, again, I'll come back to data. So, and data is so critical to us. So in our security strategy, we have 4 pillars, 3 of them around data. And what those 3 pillars are, these are 3 actions that we take: protect, harness, I forgot the third one. So devalue, so the tokenization guideline. And the last one is about, I spoke about people, it's about empowering, so empowering the ecosystem. So please look at it from a different perspective. What happened in the past will not happen, may not happen again, because we all get smarter. But risk is about being prepared for what we don't know. And that's what the fintech community needs to be prepared for.
Perfect. So it says that our time is up, but there is still a very important topic that I really want to basically get some opinion from Mathan and Vipin. which is around Data Protection Act that has recently come in, right? And I believe that most of the people in the audience also are going to be very interested in that. The fact is that ever since the DPDP actually came out basically, and there's a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of basically lack of understanding, and there's a lot of ambiguity into it. So I just want to understand, like from Vipin and Mathan, so what can organizations to do basically to better prepare for it and basically make sure that, okay, they are going to be compliant with the upcoming rules that the government is going to be notifying very soon?
So, the telco as an industry is likely to be called out as a significant data fiduciary. And so would like be some of the large scale digital ecosystems that could likely become a significant data fiduciary. So the responsibility is the reason why we will become a significant data fiduciary is surely on the basis of the humongous volume of user information that is held with us. That is true. To operate an industry like a fintech, for each of you, the most important element is still the data. Who would you want to go and service for? You would, I would want to call it out as data monetization. It still do exist. Without this data, none of these technologies are possible to be built enough. So there is data monetization that's happening. So who do you go up to? You look up to whoever has the vital and the largest number of data. So you bang on, say, a player like NPCI who has UPI data, yet another fintech player or a telco who has consumer data, etc., etc. Without which, whatever tech that you are going to build and make it relevant for the industry is going to be completely irrelevant. So the ability, when you consume such data, you are partying the same sense of protection should come with every player who is currently acquiring the data for various business acquisitions today. While there is the regulation, the act, the law which mandates securing, anonymizing data before it is shared, etc., there is still a lot of work. It is enacted already. The law is enacted. I implemented to a largest extent when in NPCI the data privacy framework and enabled early in the curve to what extent we can do when data leaves from NPCI to anybody else. How do we take care? How do we protect? But the same level of sensitivity and protection should come with the next layer, which is acquiring, the third layer, which is acquiring before it is getting disseminated, right? And it is going to be tough on each of us. Keeping in mind, although keeping in mind that it is still going to protect each and every one of you. In the role of a DPO, data privacy officer, while I feel it's a painful process for me to secure when I see myself as an individual citizen of the country, my own data being there and where will it be put to use. The role dual hat comes in as personal view and individual responsible to do that. It's a tough job ahead for each of us. We are awaiting the rules. Likely post-elections, we will get the rules. I'm sure each of you as fintech enablers, I would sincerely advise you to evaluate the rules in the construct. It is simple. Simple to understand. There are very few sections that if you touch upon. As a fintech, you would be looking upon a section 8, section 13, section 10, so that you, at technical level, what would you want to build is taken into account appropriately, right? You don't have to go through the entire law in whole. So educate yourself. We typically don't get educated in our own, what I would say, consumer-driven law itself. So I still will look forward, how do we enable ourselves in looking forward on the privacy law aspect. But here there is a gun on head, there is a penalty associated with it that will drive home the core objective for you to go and look into the law, whether we look at it for our own individual selves or not. So look into the law, ensure your ability to build tech also comes in the way. There is a lot to be done. We have geared up ourselves as a significant, likely significant data fiduciary. There is a lot of work happening at telco's end, and so is multiple banks that are doing through. Look forward with fintech.
Yeah.
I just said about the penalty will drive it back. But along with penalty, you please remember, so far, if you have breached, you are not publicly, embarrassed by saying that this XYZ organization is, there's a data breach. it will be officially declared by, as a part of the law, you have to declare that you have breached. That will bring down trust heavily. I think that is much more dangerous part, because, you know, for a small, big company, 250 crore may not be that much big impact, but reputation and trust would be a much bigger damage.
Absolutely agreed. Vipin, final thoughts on the same subject?
Yeah, so I just want to respond. So please be aware that in the business we get impacted. And for some of the clients, some of the partners we have seen, whenever there is a data breach, it's a different journey. And what matters is resilience. How do you recover and respond? We have seen partners doing amazingly good on that. I'll put it slightly differently. For me, the act is like the traffic light. Red, some of the time. Yellow, stop and watch what you need to do. And green, most of the time. So it empowers everybody. Second, I'll come back to the people theme. And as consumers and as fintech, it allows, consent is a very important part of it. It allows what as contracting entities with a fintech and a consumer, what I allow you to do. That's the second point I want to bring to the table. Third, and most importantly, and at my age, most of the learning comes from meeting client. So we met one of the clients and he was really excited. He said, we are a big brand. We don't have to push our product, but with this act, we believe it's going to empower us on who we partner with. What are their policies around privacy? What an empowering statement. I'll end there.
So in the end, so I wish we had some time for Q&A, but the organizers are giving me some killing looks. And I mean, that's definitely going to murder me later on. So, but wasn't it like a great discussion? I was incredible, right? So that basically the thoughts that were presented were amazing. So truly appreciate that. And personally, I think that we look towards you as the beacons who actually guide us through all of this cybersecurity risk and managing it properly. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for basically being part of this panel. It was a great pleasure to host you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.